Thank you, Yolanda. Good evening, everyone from Nairobi. It's a pleasure to be on this conference this afternoon. So my name is Gloria Atuheirwe. I'm from TradeMark East Africa. TradeMark East Africa is an aid for trade organization. We've been around for 10 years, counting. And really our mission is to grow prosperity in the region through trade. So initially we were working in the East African countries only, but now in the last 1 or 2 years, we've expanded our operations to Southern Africa and the Horn of Africa as well. My particular role is, I think based on a lot of the conversations that have happened in the course of today, is because we know that there's a disparity in terms of the benefits, the access, the opportunities for women, particularly in the trade space. And so we designed a program that seeks to bridge that gap and just create kind of a fair sort of level ground for access to both the opportunity and the benefits from trade. I think the continent has advanced very significantly over the last decade or 2 decades in the trade space, but we have to ensure that that trade is sustainable and it's inclusive, and that is what I do every day. My mission really is for the empowerment of women, not just from an economic perspective, but also social empowerment through trade. Thank you, and looking forward to the discussion. Firstly, I'd just like to say that in a way, that statement is not really a true reflection. We kind of often treat women as a homogeneous group, but they really are not. Women in business are such a varied, complex, interesting dynamic. And I think it's very important to sort of unpack that for us to really be able to move the needle in this space. So I think it's important that we try and understand what are the constraints, what are the different levels. So that if you look at East Africa, I work across East Africa, for example. So if you look at the profile of your average exporter, for example, in Kenya, compared to the profile of your average exporter in Burundi, you'll come up with a completely different profile. So if we talk about exporters in East Africa, their realities are very different. And I think that's a very important thing to appreciate as we go into capacity building, for example, as Phyllis mentioned earlier. But I think to address the issue of competitiveness, we need to obviously look at what are the constraints, what are the barriers. I think they've been touched on quite a bit by the previous speakers. But I think it's important to emphasize just the fact that there's just limited access. It's not no access at all, it's just limited access to various inputs and resources that women need to build their businesses. Things like land, things like capital, Yabi talked about technology. So these are things you need to be able to build to be competitive, but there's kind of disparities in terms of access to some of these resources. But one of the things that I would like to speak about mainly is also for informality. As you said, businesses usually, and not generally, but quite a number of women-owned businesses are small, trading in small value or fragmented or opportunistic. When you see an opportunity, you jump in there, then it doesn't work, you pull out. So that's kind of how we've been defined over the years. And this has been a barrier in and of itself, because you're not able to scale, maybe you're not able to get into contracts in the regional or global value chains, just by virtue of how you've been running your business. And that's, of course, for various reasons. I recall ITC did a study, I think maybe 3 years ago, and they found that of all the export firms across, I think the globe, in East Africa, the average was only 27% on average. Of course, the percentage is higher in Kenya than in other countries, but just a small percentage of the export firms are actually owned by women. So trying to figure out why. There's a number of constraints at the back end of that. One of those being information. Information sounds so obvious, but there's a lot of information asymmetry out there. And bridging that gap is critical if you're going to build businesses and competitiveness of women-owned business. Where do I find the information that I need? Is it easy for me to understand that information? Someone talked about import and export processes. These for many years have been very complex, very heavy documentation. Who would support a business to sort of unpack that and just figure out what's the best way to go about this process. So a lot of it is around just passing on the information, availing information in a way that is easy to consume, that's easy to translate based on the sector or the business that a woman is running. Of course, we can't run away from the gender roles, and I think we touched on this one, and that affects networks. It's not in of itself an issue, but it usually constrains you in terms of how do you build a network in the market, not just local, but global. You need time, you need to invest in market intelligence, you need to invest in, connecting with people within your country and beyond, and that takes time. Time is really an asset that many women don't necessarily have, and that creates a disadvantage. But on the flip side of it, again, has been said before, technology has sort of bridged that gap. So people have been able to do businesses from the comfort of their homes, and that's really great. So I think that's what we have to pick up on, take advantage of technology, take advantage of the opportunities that are opening up in the continent through the AFCFTA, take advantage of the improvements, a lot of automation now in processes, not just from the private sector side, but even from governments. Governments have really, TradeMark has worked a lot in that space of automating processes, export processes, import processes, clearing, customs, all those processes have really, really improved. And now you find people are spending less time, clearing their documentation, getting certification, clearances, and all things like that. So I think there's so much opportunity now that women can take up because of the advancements through technology, through removing barriers, even corruption and processes. Because of the slowness in processes, there's a lot of issues around corruption and transparency, but a lot of trade facilitation mechanisms have come in place. And so many of these issues have now been addressed. And so it's easier. It's not completely without challenge, but it's much easier now to get into the trade space, both in a regional and global sense. Yeah, awesome. I'm excited about that question because the majority of the portfolio I work with actually is with the small and informal traders. And the issue is, again, around just understanding the dynamics around in which they are doing their businesses. Usually, again, it's issues of information. It's just not being well versed with what's available. And I'll give you an example. A lot of the women we work with, we call them women cross-border traders. So traditionally, they would move from one side of the border and move commodities across to the other side of the border. So for many years, even till today, especially when COVID hit, a lot of these women use the informal routes, what we call Pannier Routes in East Africa. So they're going literally through bushes, through rivers, the back route, trying to avoid any form of authority or regulator along the way. What they don't understand is that there's actually regimes in place to support that kind of trade. There's a simplified trading regime that would help you facilitate your crossing from one end of the border to the other with really minimal disturbance. So many people don't even know about that. And that's why they forever keep trying to use the illegal routes. So sensitization is a big part of what we do, just raising awareness around what the opportunities are and of course, what rights and responsibilities small traders like those have. So it's something that we continually have to build. But next to that is just the power of collective. I call it the power of the collective. So the fact that the power of the collective in the sense that you can't do this journey alone. So there's power in numbers. Come together, form a group. Identify what the common commodity you have or that you can trade in, pool your resources together, and you grow your value that way. Because many times we are fragmented, we run small businesses here and there, and yet if you came together, really you'll be able to grow and make a difference. So we facilitate, we build that a lot in our capacity building. We build cooperatives, we build platforms that really bring women together. First of all, to build their own network, but also to optimize the resources that they have and enable them to be able to, take up big opportunities beyond their, beyond their own small or local space that they are operating in. So there are two areas. There's the capacity building, which is about the woman herself. Sorry, video. And then there is the environment, the trading environment. And so I would say my pledge is twofold. It's one is to continue to build the capacity to make information available, to build that specialization that I think Phyllis has touched on, and just grow value in that regard. But secondly is on the demand side of things, to support, which is what TradeMark does, which is support even the infrastructure around these businesses, the logistics, the markets, physical markets. We are now investing in physical marketplaces, and the policy environment. Dealing with non-tariff barriers, that's a huge one, which I can't really get into now. But a lot of non-tariff barriers, especially within African countries, even within East Africa itself. And we have to continuously advocate and have continuously engaged governments to remove these barriers, because at the end of the day, if it's cheaper for people to trade with China than to trade with each other, then we won't be really making much progress. So there's a lot of work around advocacy, around dialogue, conversations between private sector and governments, and then also building capacity of businesses themselves to take up these opportunities. So for me, we have to look at we have to find a solution that is holistic in that sense. Thank you.
So much.